semicolon. Insert another row, A307, Seattle 275, right? So insert into basically inserts singular rows into your account or into your data, into your table in your database. Note that string values here are single quoted. A301, New York, all of them are encapsulated in single quotes. That can be a bit different from your programming languages such as C++, where you use double quotes for strings. In databases, we use single quotes for values, and in general, we keep double quotes for attribute names. This would become more clearer when we talk about generalized projection, but essentially for attribute names, we would use double quotes, but in general, when we're inserting certain values, we will always use single quotes. Okay. We can also specify the attributes into which we want to insert our data. So insert into account, account ID, branch name, balance, within brackets, values A301, New York 350, right? We can, in our current database, we can also technically add multiple accounts with the same account ID, right? So insert into account, account ID 350, Seattle 800, account ID 350, Los Angeles 195, right? So these are basically account details about an account ID, the branch name, and the balance. So should we, I want to ask you guys this question, should we be able to allow these to insert operations on the same table? That is account ID 350, Seattle 800, account ID 350, Los Angeles 195. Should this be allowed? Can an account ID be in different states or different cities? The same account ID? No? More or less no, right? So on that note, an overwhelming no, obviously. Okay, good. So on that note, we talked about this in terms of relational algebra. What do we need to have as our attribute that makes sure that that particular attribute cannot be duplicated? That particular attribute will always be unique.
Is it something to do with primary key?
Exactly, right? We want to make sure that our account ID is a primary key so that that particular attribute is always unique, because that is what we use to address our rows. So we said that our current account table looks like this: account ID _, branch name blah, balance blah. But we want to make sure that account ID, this particular attribute, is a primary key. So we can do something like this. That is, create table account, account ID _, branch name cat20, balance blah, and primary key is account ID. Now that we have stated this particular primary key in our account table, now that if we want to add another row that has the same primary key value, you would now get an error that says constraint mismatch error or unresolved constraints error or things like that. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Can we go back to the last page?
This one?
And last one more. Yes. 15.
This one?
And page 15, 1.5.
1.5? Yeah.
Like you say, it cannot be inserted with the same account ID. So the old one won't be covered by the new information with the same account ID, right?
Okay, so I think you're talking about this one, right?
Yes.
So here we have the same account ID for two accounts, right? So no, the old one will not be updated. Basically, the first one will work. We will add a new account that has A350 Seattle 800. The moment we try to add a new account that has the same primary key, it would give you an error.
Okay.
It won't even allow you to insert a new entry or update the old entry. We cannot update the old entry using an insert statement. There are separate keywords to update a particular entry. Insert basically means add a new row, and this will not let you add a new row because account ID is a primary key.
Okay. And one more question. Every time we do the insert operation, the new row will be automatically adding to the last row, or it will be just follow the order of account ID number.
Good question. Okay. Very good question. Remember that. Very good question. So before I answer that, can anybody else answer How's question? So How is asking, if I add if one row after the other, would it always follow the order of my account IDs, or would it be something else? Any answers for that? What do you think should it be? Let's say that we have guaranteed that it's a primary key, no duplicate IDs will be added. Leon says it should be ordered by the account ID. Anybody else? I think so. Yaswanti says that it should be the sequence of addition. Malia says it should be the order you add it in. Order. Most of it is order. Okay. So that is the thing that we need to maintain. So Leon, Yaswanti, Malaya, Taha, and Edward, all of you are correct. Depends upon the database implementation as to how they are going to order their values. Remember, in relational algebra and SQL, we do not make any assumptions on how the data is ordered. We are going to assume that they are not ordered in any way. They can be ordered according to their account ID. They can be ordered according to their sequence of insertions, or they can be ordered in some other way that database implementation feels that would be the best way to retrieve results. It can be that they are maintaining some hash value and they are maintaining those results like that. It does not have to be the sequence of additions. It has, but we as a database designer are not going to make any assumptions on how a database is going to save those values. How? And everybody else, does that make sense? What I just said?
Yes. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. The order does not matter, depends upon the database implementation. Okay. So we talked about primary keys. A table cannot have multiple primary keys, obvious. And we can have other types of constraints as well. We will talk about those later. Like certain values can only be from certain set of values, or a balance cannot be less than something or less than zero. A share price cannot be negative and things like that. So there are other types of constraints as well that we will talk about later as well. Okay. Removing rows. So if we want to delete a particular row from an account or from any table, we can just say delete from account, the table name, where account ID equals to this particular value. This would basically delete that particular row with that particular account ID. So in this particular scenario, we can all say that this particular delete statement would delete one particular row, right? Is my claim correct? Am I correct? Would this statement always delete one row? Yes or no? If yes, why? If no, why?
Couldn't that delete anything under account that's listed as account ID A307?
Yes, but can we have more than one A307s? If my account ID is a primary key, we cannot have more than one A307s, right?
Yeah, then only one would get deleted if it was a primary.
Exactly, you're correct, exactly. So in this particular scenario, it would only delete one row. However, if we were not deleting based on a primary key, if we were deleting, delete from account where branch is New York. Let's say we are shutting down the New York branch. In that particular scenario, all accounts from New York branches would be deleted, right? So we can also delete all accounts from our delete with this delete equation as well. So delete from account would delete all rows from our account table. This also
So
relates, yeah.
I was just going to ask, so you showed us how to create a primary key. Can you remove a primary key?
Um, Once you have created a schema of a table, it is better to create a new table if you want to reassign the schema rather than remove
Okay,
a
thank you.
primary key from, because that would create issues. Delete from account is essentially a command that would delete all accounts from a particular table. Now, this usually comes into play when we were talking about transactions. Imagine that you were typing out this particular instruction, and after this particular part, your code just got sent to the database server. That means that at this particular point, all your bank accounts are getting deleted because it has not seen the remainder of your code, right? So this is where your transactions come in, where you can say that, okay, I made a mistake, roll back to my previous state of my system, right? Okay. We can also drop a table. That means that delete the entire table account. There is a difference from delete from account and drop table account. Both of them achieve the same thing, that is to delete all instances in your table. But delete from account would essentially delete everything one by one. Drop table account is basically, imagine doing a format on your hard drive. So delete from account is basically deleting individual files in your system to create more space. Drop table is format my drive. I don't care. Right? So delete that entire table right now. We can also drop an entire database from our system, drop database bank. I have had students who have done this for fun. Once they have created all of those databases for their projects that had huge values. And then for fun, they tried, okay, what happens when we do a drop database bank or a drop table account? Let's just say it's not happy, and please don't be those students. Right? It is never possible to retrieve those data after you have dropped them. Okay. So SQL queries. So we are going, it's already this time. Okay, so let me quickly go over the select statement, and we will continue this in next class, I guess. Uh, uh, in SQL queries, we use something called the select statement. It will be a bit confusing because select is essentially relational algebra's project, and where is essentially relational algebra's select. Becomes a bit confusing. Welcome to my world, but welcome as it is. So we have select statements here that says select attributes A1 and A2 from table R1 and R2 where this particular predicate matches, right? So in essence, we can say that select A1, A2, those attributes, which we can just say that it's a project operation that project from the table A1, A2, A3, and so on from my table. Sometimes because of this naming mismatch, sometimes some books call it restrict as well. Long, just give me a second.